So we're here today. We have a couple purposes for this webinar today. One is to discuss and share ways that teacher educators can use data to drive their own instruction or coaching for teacher candidates. And then we're also going to explore resources to support teacher candidates in using data to drive instruction, specifically looking at student achievement charts. And we'll be sharing what a student achievement chart is, what the benefits of those might be to helping teacher candidates use data to drive their instruction. So we're going to share the agenda with you for our session today. We're going to spend the first part of our time together focusing on current practices that teacher educators are using to drive their instruction using data. And then the second part of our session, we'll be providing time for you all to be in small groups where you're going to be able to explore various student achievement charts and discuss how they can be used to support teacher candidates in analyzing student work and planning instruction. So we're hoping to give you plenty of time to dig in, to explore student achievement charts, to discuss them and collaborate with your peers who are on the call today. So one of the first things we want to do is engage you all in sharing with us what some of your current data use practices are. So in the chat, we would love for you to share ways in which you've used data to drive instruction or the coaching of teacher candidates. And then also share with us what types of data you collect and use to analyze to drive that instruction and coaching. So take a minute right now to respond to the prompt and question in the chat and share with us types of data and ways you're using those data to drive your instruction. Yeah, formative data, exit tickets, performance assessment data, walkthrough evidence. And I noticed some of you are mentioning your instructional rubrics, so collecting data related to the teacher competencies that you've identified. Major assessments within your coursework. Evidence collected from monitoring students. Surveys. Yeah, absolutely. Continue to keep sharing those types of data and kind of the way that you use those data. So as you're thinking about collecting data from your pop cycles, your walkthroughs, exit tickets, what are some of the ways in which you're using those data as you're coaching and supporting your candidates? And so we put together just some ideas from the field, and actually what you put in the chat is very similar to what we're seeing across the coalition. We're seeing site coordinators, faculty, mentors collecting a variety of data and then using those in various ways. So for example, we've seen site coordinators and faculty create professional learning communities or pairs of teacher candidates where they can collaborate and provide support to each other, give feedback to each other. Also, we've seen site coordinators and faculty members really use data to identify key areas where they want to support and coach their candidates, and then providing really clear models and resources to support their teacher candidates in those specific areas, ensuring that they're being responsive to the needs of their teacher candidates. So today, one of the things we want to do is just be able to highlight some work that's happening at Brooklyn College within their secondary program. And so we have invited Dr. Saltmarsh to share some of the work that's happening in Professor Clark's class and how she's using data to drive instruction in her student teaching course. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Saltmarsh to share with you all.
Yeah, thank you, Linda. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm really honored to just have a couple of moments with all of you to talk about what is happening at Brooklyn College. And as Linda shared, I'm bringing to you an assignment and an experience that took place in their secondary student teaching seminar. And the professor is Professor Ingrid Thomas Clark, and she is also their site coordinator. So she's here on the call with us today. I know I saw her enter the room. So we want to welcome her and then also just highlight that she's here with us today, and she is the one that orchestrated this assignment for her teacher candidates in the secondary department at Brooklyn College. So what you're looking at here on your screen is the actual assignment that she delivered to her teacher candidates. And it's kind of small, at least it is on my end. So I'm going to talk you through the assignment a little bit. We tried to keep this assignment relatively low stakes for the teacher candidates. What we knew about the context in New York City and in Brooklyn at the time when we were giving this assignment is that most of our teacher candidates were not able to be in the classroom. So most of our teacher candidates in Brooklyn are still very much in a virtual setting where they are teaching virtually to their students, and our field supervisors are not able to get into those virtual classrooms sometimes. So we're up against a lot of barriers, much like all of you have been over the past year. So in knowing that, and in knowing that we were sort of struggling to get data on our teacher candidates, and we were struggling to get data from those observations, which many of you had addressed here in the chat, walkthroughs or pop cycles, we decided to give them this assignment. And what we asked them to do was just to capture between 10 to 15 minutes of themselves teaching a portion of a lesson. We left it very open. We didn't specifically go into the rubric and say, we want to see you deliver a model, or we want to see you engage questioning techniques. We allowed them the freedom and the flexibility to decide what it was that they were going to capture and bring to class. But what we did was we set up a structure that when they did come to class, they had already created a self-reflection form. So you can see that sort of on the left-hand side. And I see some questions too, as if you'll have a link to this document. I'm happy to share the link to the actual document with you too in just a moment. But they completed just a brief reflection, which you see there on the side of the screen. And what we asked them to really think about was, what did you feel went well in this 10 to 15 minutes of your delivery? What did you feel like could have gone better? We asked them to provide some evidence grounded in their instructional rubric. Their instructional rubric is the Danielson rubric. And then we did share with them that they have self-reflected, but we were going to share out in small groups where together we watched the video, and then from their peers and from their professors, they were going to receive feedback grounded in the rubric based on a reinforcement and a refinement. So very much like what they would have experienced had they been able to be in the classroom, or had their supervisor been able to be in the classroom with them. A very meaningful experience. So I don't want to speak for Ingrid on the call, but I know we were a little bit nervous because with all of that technology and playing videos and showing videos and bringing rubrics and that type of thing, we weren't quite sure what to expect. But if we go to the next slide, you can see it was a very meaningful experience, not only for Ingrid and myself, but also for the teacher candidates. So one thing that Ingrid and I were able to gather as we went through this experience was we could see and gather data from the teacher candidates that they were really sort of struggling to connect their virtual assessments with what it was that they were teaching. So we had a couple of different examples where we could see either teacher candidates didn't assess what they had taught in the lesson, or they didn't have a plan for what they were going to assess, or there was some disconnect between what they were assessing. So some really great data came out for Ingrid and I as we were watching these videos, and we were looking at what our teacher candidates needed. And then here we brought just a couple of quotes from the students when we asked them to reflect on the experience itself of actually capturing themselves via video, sharing that video with their classmates, and then receiving feedback grounded in their instructional rubric. So I'll allow you just 30 seconds to look at these three quotes from Rahima, Fatima, and Nishant. And then there's a couple of things as you're sort of reviewing those that I want to pull out that really stood out to us as we were using this data to plan for next steps. And so we could see here that our teacher candidates were sharing with us that This process really helped them understand that feedback should be twofold. They must embrace what was going well, and then also the areas that they needed to work on, but that they had to remind themselves that teaching is always about improving their methods and their ways. Also that perspectives are important because teachers are going to be teaching to an audience, not just one person. So to understand what is going well and what is resonating with their students was really important to them as well. And then this last one really spoke to us was when a space is safe, one takes risks. And they did see this as an opportunity to take risks with their instruction and receive feedback. As well as Ingrid and I now have some really valuable data from this work to use as we're planning for the next set of meetings that we have with these individuals. So hats off to Ingrid from Brooklyn College in the secondary department.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Saltmarsh and Professor Clark, for being willing to share how you're using data, whether that's video evidence or data collected through video to help drive your instruction and feedback and support for the teacher candidates. So we really appreciate you sharing that today. So as we move into this next part, we want to take a moment and just have you pause and reflect. As teacher educators, we have the opportunity to model using data to drive instruction for our teacher candidates. And this benefits the teacher candidates in their development and mastery of the teaching competencies because they have opportunities to see how their own instructors are using data to be responsive to their needs and to drive their instruction. And if we can take opportunities to model and explicitly label the ways that we're using data to drive our instruction and support for teacher candidates, it allows them then to be able to take that into their own practice and use it as they're working with their students. So we want to take a moment to pause and give you an opportunity to either individually write on a piece of paper or in a Word document, what are some ways in which you can model using data to drive instruction or coaching for your teacher candidates? We'd also encourage you, if you want to type in the chat your response to this question, it would be a great way for you to share with others what you're thinking about as far as how you can model using data to drive your own instruction and coaching. So I'll give you a couple minutes to reflect and potentially put that in the chat for the rest of the group as well. Okay. As we move into this next part of our purpose, we really want to talk about how we can support teacher candidates in using data to drive instruction. And as you're putting your ideas of ways that you can model these practices for teacher candidates in the chat, I encourage you to keep sharing those as we go. But now what we're going to do is we're going to provide you some time to explore student achievement charts and how they can be used to help teacher candidates use data to drive their instruction. And we've invited Jody Dennis, who is a site coordinator from Texas Tech University, and one of her teacher candidates, Jaden Willis, to be here with us today to introduce to you what a student achievement chart is and how they have found it to be beneficial. So we thank them both for being here today. We're always excited to hear from site coordinators and teacher candidates. So we welcome you, and I'll turn it over to Jody to kind of get us started and share with us what student achievement charts are.
Hi, thank y'all for coming today, and I hope that y'all learn a lot about the student achievement chart because it's one of my favorite coaching tools. The student achievement chart is a tool we utilize to coach teacher candidates to disaggregate data. The student achievement chart provides a structure for candidates to break down data they obtain from graded student work. The teacher candidates categorize graded work into categories based on whether the student work meets specified criteria aligned to the state standards. I would like to hand it over to Jaden Willer. She's one of my student teachers. She's a middle-level math candidate, and she's going to share the benefits of using the student achievement chart as a student teacher.
Hi, I'm Jaden. I am Jody's student at Texas Tech. So there are several benefits to using the student achievement chart. So I'll just go over a few of them, but one of the biggest one is it helps you address misconceptions before you even teach the lesson. So when doing the student achievement chart, it requires you to do a pre-assessment. So by giving the students a pre-assessment, we are able to see what kind of background knowledge they have about a certain topic. Maybe some students know more than others. And then also by analyzing their work, before forming your lesson, you can see what misconceptions those students have developed. And so by doing that, you can then form your lesson over addressing those misconceptions and what the students need. So rather than just doing the same lesson every year, it might differ from year to year or even from class to class, because different classes need different needs. And so by having that pre-assessment, that allows us to see those needs. Another thing is it helps identify student growth. So I can see, since there's 4 different levels involved on the student achievement chart, there's exceeds, meets, approaches, and far below. I can see what students are where before the lesson and then see what students are where after the lesson by examining their pre-assessment and their post-assessment. So it's a great tool to see each individual student's growth, and then you can see how much your students grew as a class. And the goal, obviously not every student is going to be at exceeds, but the goal is to get each student to at least move up from where they were. So if they were at meets, we want to get them to exceeds, or if they were at far falls below, we would like to get them to approached. And then the last thing, which as a teacher is important for me, is the student achievement chart just allows you to know like what you're doing is working, because you can see that student growth. So by being able to see like the class grow, each individual student grow, you know that what you're doing is working. And then if for some reason there wasn't much growth, then you can go back, reevaluate what you did, maybe what the students didn't understand, and then redo that instruction from there.
Great, thank you, Jaden and Jody. We appreciate you sharing about the student achievement chart. I know there were comments in the chat about getting links to the student achievement chart. That's actually what we're going to get to do here in just a moment. We're going to give you a task card with links to several examples of student achievement charts. Also, at the end of the slide deck, you'll see that there are links to different student achievement charts that you're free to look at. I will pause for a moment if anyone has any questions they want to put in the chat for Jaden and Jody before we transition into our opportunity for you all to explore student achievement charts. Jaden and Jody aren't going anywhere. They're going to also join in some of the small group discussion. So if you think of questions, they'll be here at the end of the presentation as well for you to be able to ask those questions. We just really appreciate Jody, you and Jaden taking time to be with us today and to share. And Jaden, we're wishing you all the luck in the rest of your student teaching this semester too. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. So now we're going to transition and give you a chance to really look at some of these student achievement chart examples and to collaborate with your peers on the call around how you might use them or what the benefits might be. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Lund to share the task card we've developed for you today to really guide your small group exploration.
Awesome. First, Jody and Jaden, thank you so much. It's one thing for us to talk about the student achievement chart. It's a whole nother level to hear it from the field and the experiences that you're having. So thank you so much for sharing that. So first, right now we're going to put a link in the chat. This is a link to a task card. So we're going to be breaking into groups in just a moment and going through kind of a series of activities to sort of explore student achievement charts and have some rich conversation and discussion about them. To support you in that work, we're going to be using a task card. So you'll want to open this up. I'll give you some time to do it in a little bit as well. And just know that all of the resources that we're going to use, directions, steps, questions are all going to be in this task card itself. So we're going to break into groups. We'll be in groups for about 30 minutes, and there'll be 2 parts or 2 tasks completed in that 30 minutes. The first part is an independent task. All right, so you're going to get into your groups. You're going to have a USPREP facilitator in the room. That USPREP team member is just they're going to be there for timing to help make sure we're kind of sticking to time. They're going to be there to kind of prompt the questions, and they're also going to be a scribe for the second part of our work in the group. So the first part of the group work is going to be independent. You're going to get to turn your camera off if you'd like to, and you're going to get to explore some student achievement charts. We have 3 examples that are in the task card, and we want you to explore a minimum of 2 of them. So even if one speaks to your soul because you happen to teach math and that's your heart, take some time, explore a second one as well, just to really engage in that rich conversation. If you have time to explore all 3, that's great. As you're looking through those student achievement charts,
consider the objective, look at the way the student achievement chart is structured, take a look at the assessment. There'll be an assessment either linked in it or in the document itself. So just take some time to explore. So again, you're going to get into your group. The first 10 minutes is going to be independent and just kind of exploring the student achievement charts that are linked in your task card. The second part of our time in the small groups is going to be conversation. So majority of the time, about 20 minutes, your USPREP facilitator can share their screen. They'll have a slide that has these 2 questions, and they're going to document your thinking. So there are 2 questions that we want you to consider as you're looking through those student achievement charts, and 2 questions that will guide your conversation. The first is, what components in the student achievement chart examples would most benefit a teacher candidate as they plan instruction? And the second is, how does using a student achievement chart support teacher candidates in using data to drive instruction? And so we want to make sure that we provide that time for that rich conversation. So there will be about 20 minutes. Just know that this timing is flexible. If that independent portion, if people are done early, just make sure you're communicating with your facilitator and they can move you on to the conversation portion if everyone's ready for that. So right now, I want everyone to take a moment and open up that task card. And then I just want to give you about a minute. If you have any questions about the task that we're asking you to do, or the way the next 30 minutes is being spent, go ahead and toss that into the chat. If I don't see any questions, I'm going to open up the rooms and send you to your breakout rooms. So I'll give you about a minute to open that task card. And if you have any questions, to type them into chat.
Sounds like there were some really great conversations happening in breakout sessions around these 2 questions. And Linda or Sarah, if you want to go ahead and pull those up. As we went through your working slides where your USPREP member was capturing notes in your breakout sessions, we noticed that many groups listed similar components that would most benefit a teacher candidate as they planned instruction. So if you want to head to the next slide. So we took a look at all of those slides and some of those components that our USPREP members were catching. And here's what we heard. 1 out of 8 of our breakout groups were talking about the component of standards and objectives really benefiting a teacher candidate as they planned instruction. 3 out of 8 of our breakout groups listed categories or levels of work. 2 out of 8 of our breakout groups talked about the importance of the description of categories. Some groups even talked about the importance of being measurable and observable. Oh, there we are. Perfect. So you can see them real time. All right. So then 2 out of 8, again, talked about the importance of the descriptions of the categories. Some groups, again, even talked about the importance of these descriptions being measurable and observable. 3 out of 8 of our groups listed student level information as a component. And then 2 out of 8 of our groups listed before and after lesson data. So we really just had the opportunity to explore a wide range of what student achievement charts could look like, depending on content and grade level. So we know that there's some flexibility in the way that they look, but we also know that these are really the critical components that effective student achievement charts should include to truly promote that backwards design lesson planning and use of pre and post assessment data to plan instruction. So a lot of us really had these listed already in our breakout session. So we're really excited to be able to see that. So let's go ahead and dig into that next question. How does using a student achievement chart support teacher candidates in using data to drive instruction? Sarah, I'm going to invite you to come off mute and highlight just a couple things around question number 2 in terms of how using a student achievement chart supports teacher candidates and using data to drive instruction.
Sure. So I had the opportunity in my breakout group to work with professionals from Texas A&M Commerce and Toronto, New York. And some of the things that we talked about with regards to that second question, one is, so if we think about using the student achievement chart for the teacher candidates and using data to drive instruction, we came up with several different ways that they would do that. But one thing that really stood out to us as well is when we looked at the different types of charts that were given to us as examples, is that we would really want to also get our teacher candidates in this area to know that these are types of tools that are going to be necessary for them, not just as teacher candidates, but as professionals as they move into their career as educators, to show that their teaching is having a positive effect on student learning. And we talked a lot about, depending on where we're at, certain places we're given scripted curriculums or we're given curriculums to follow, but that we know as educators, we have to make modifications and we have to do something a little bit different for those students who are already beyond what the curriculum says. And we have to go back and do some support, scaffolding, and reteaching for students who aren't quite there yet. And that this type of tool helps us support those decisions. If we are, somebody says, why this for those kids? We have this data to say, because I know where my students are and I know what my students need as it pertains to this topic. And so we want to teach our teacher candidates how to do that when we have them, but we want to teach them how important that skill is as an educator going into the profession. So we spent a lot of time talking about that and how the student achievement chart really supports those decisions and those conversations that they're going to have, not only as teacher candidates, but as educators in the field. I hope that answers it, Melissa.
Perfect. Yes, thank you, Sarah. Laura, would you mind going ahead and sharing out what your group discussed around question number 2?
Yes, absolutely. Team, if you want to give a little wave, we had quite a few in the group there. We had just a really rich discussion around a lot of what you had shared as well, Sarah. And we focused a bit on, this idea of self-reflection and learner agency. So using this document for teacher candidates to reflect on the impact of their practice and also empowering them as the teacher to see, when I do these things, I get these student outcomes. And then the team also talked about learner agency and focusing on self-reflection for the PK-12 students. So if you used a similar document, you could have the clear expectations, they could connect to the objective, we would all have a clear understanding of the descriptors of what we're looking for. And so really allowing the teacher candidate to connect with the students in the classroom around these common expectations. And then finally, we talked about how we might use the document or the student achievement chart as we're using it throughout the lesson. So yes, as a pre and post assessment, but you can also take anecdotal data on it throughout a lesson, throughout the day, throughout the course of the week, when you're pulling small groups and seeing the impact there. So really coming at it from that self-reflective growth mindset stance as both the teacher and the person who's leading the students as well.
Fantastic. Thanks, Laura. And I really like the way that you highlighted how this could really be a tool that could be used throughout, not just for the pre and the post. Fantastic. All right. And then Keandra, would you mind sharing out from your group a little bit around question number 2?
Yes, thank you. We had such also an engaging conversation in our group as well. I think some of the things that some of the highlights that we've come up with have already kind of been shared. One thing that we also highlighted in our group was not only is the teacher candidate being able to be successful with analyzing data, but then this also impacts the mentor teacher's instruction as well, of being able to really get granular on the things that you're looking for the very specific lesson. That we know that if data trends have changed over the years, so depending on how long your mentor teacher has been in their role, their way of looking at data and using data may be a little bit different. So this is a way to also support the mentor teacher in gaining new skills as they're having to have the conversations of exactly what needs to be seen at each level and being able to tie the objective to the performances for each student as well. So we thought that was definitely a powerful aspect of being able to use the SAC chart, not only for the teacher candidate, but to also change the practice of mentor teachers as well. Also being able to really track the small increments of growth with students, because sometimes students, especially your struggling students, you're not always as easily or quickly able to notice the changes for the betterment of their growth. So being able to use this really helps to be able to identify the incremental changes of student growth as well. Thank you.
Nice. Thanks, Keandra. And I see that, Sarah, your group also had that same conversation of being able to really use it as communication between the teacher candidate and the mentor and faculty. Fantastic. All right. So we're going to go ahead and move on to our next slide. And as we do that, I want to, as we begin to kind of wrap up our time together, we encourage you to just drop in the chat how you might apply some of the new learning from today's webinar. We'll give you just a minute to be able to respond to this question and using our chat feature. Nice. So we see really using it as an incentive to be able to share with faculty, coordinate with the instructor of our assessment course to create student achievement charts as a tool. We see a strong need to review student data and many times in our student teaching experience. Fantastic. All right, great. Sounds like we're really going to be taking some of from the discussion that we had and the examples that we had a chance to be able to look at, really taking that back to our campus and really relating it to our own context. So as promised, if you go ahead and click on that next slide, we have some resources that we'd like to share. So along with some of the student achievement charts you had an opportunity to be able to dig into today, we also have a student achievement chart rubric that was developed by our partners over at Texas A&M University Commerce that they're using. It's a great tool if you want to be able to dig into that and see how they're using that rubric as they're looking at student achievement charts. So the last thing, if we could ask you to do as we wrap up our time together, we just want to say thank you so much for taking this time to be able to join us for this webinar today. We truly value your feedback. And if you could take just a moment to complete a brief survey, we really do value this. And we think about how we can continue to improve for our next webinar sessions.